What was that picture?
Desperation.
Oh.
Desperate to get into newspapers.
Yes.
It's the whole Hollywood syndrome. What do I do to be noticed? And she's not being noticed. And it's really such fun to watch how low she goes, how high she goes, how in every direction just to get coverage. It's great fun.
Yeah, I don't sympathize with Meghan Markle. I mean, I know I've already said it to you, but she quit her job. She chose to pursue something else. She wanted to monetize the newfound fame she'd had because of the British royal family, and she exploits her connection to the British royal family.
Nobody ever asks them, do you regret having lied to Oprah Winfrey? Do you regret having lied on Netflix and all the magazine interviews? Don't you see what a terrible mistake you've made?
There is a plan, not a reconciliation, not a homecoming, not a family healing in public with emotional footage of reunited brothers and grandchildren meeting their grandfather. A plan, specific, calculated, timed with precision. Designed to walk Harry and Meghan back through the door of the very institution they publicly dismantled on their way out, and make the watching world applaud while it happens. Tom Bower sees it. He has named it. He has laid it out in the kind of cold-sourced documented detail that does not leave room for comfortable denial. The man who exposed Robert Maxwell as a pension fraudster while Maxwell was still alive. The man who took on Gordon Brown while Brown was still in office. The man who built his 2022 book, Revenge from 80 Named Sources. That man looked at everything Harry and Meghan have done and said and published and filmed over 6 years and arrived at a conclusion that cuts through every piece of emotional packaging surrounding their planned return. This is leverage. The children are not being brought back because the family suddenly felt like traveling. They are being deployed. The Invictus platform has been quietly repurposed from a veteran cause into a vehicle for strategic re-entry. And the dying king, the wounded veterans, and the emotional weight of two brothers who have not been in the same room since a funeral in 2022 are all being used as props in the same performance. Welcome to the Marquee Report. Let's take Tom Bower's documented case apart.
I think Meghan is suffering the consequences of her own actions. I don't think Anne Boleyn slept with her brother. You know what I mean?
Well, there's that, but also you see the whole point is Anne Boleyn lost her head. It was all part of a political problem. The king, having broken away from Rome, needed a son, and Anne Boleyn was in the way, and she was in the way in many other political ways. Meghan was never banished or anything. She banished herself.
Quit.
She only took the job, the marriage, to promote herself back in Hollywood as fast as she could return. Anne Boleyn wanted to be the queen, and there's another difference. Meghan wasn't the queen; she was just a lowly duchess.
But she wanted to be the queen.
She wanted to be the queen. So the comparison is so pathetically stupid that, well, you know, some people will say anything just to get attention, and in that sense, May has succeeded. She's got attention, but she gives feminism a bad name. That's the real problem. She does, and even Meghan, I don't think, deserves to be compared to Anne Boleyn, because I mean, at least she was trying to be something more than just a third-rate actress,
Right.
Whereas Anne Boleyn was in the end a political force. She was someone rivaling the king. She wouldn't do what the king wanted, and the king was struggling. He needed to secure the Protestant succession. So the comparison is so foolish. It just doesn't take much to just dismiss it. But on the other hand, it does raise so many problems about, the writing about the royal family, who are in great trouble now.
Piece by piece. And look at what is actually driving the plan. Nobody in Harry and Meghan's operation wants you to understand clearly. Let's start with the Invictus Games, because this is where Bower's analysis is both most specific and most uncomfortable for people who genuinely care about what the organization was created to do. Harry created something real. The original mission, bringing wounded and recovering service members together through athletic competition, recognizing their sacrifice and supporting their recovery, is genuinely noble. The athletes at the center of those games are genuinely inspiring. The cause is real. Nobody is disputing that. What Bauer is disputing is what surrounds it now. According to his documented assessment, the cameras that should be finding the athletes keep finding the front row. The story that should be about sacrifice keeps becoming a story about the couple watching it. The Invictus platform, which once drew attention because of the veterans at its center, now draws attention because of the celebrity presence at its edges. Harry, who created something noble, is either unable to see what it has become or has decided the trade-off is acceptable. Bauer suggests the former. But either reading is a serious problem for an organization that exists to serve veterans, particularly given the documented financial picture that has emerged from the accounts filed with the UK Charity Commission. Direct grants to veteran organizations down 63% in a year when foundation income rose 41%. Veterans at the Vancouver Games reportedly paying for their own flights, their own hotel stays, and their own equipment. $63.2 million spent on 543 competitors, working out to approximately $118,000 per competitor, while the U.S. Warrior Games serves a similar population on $2 million annually. A noble cause. Quietly converted, in Bauer's assessment, into a relevance machine. The Sussex show wearing humanitarian clothing. Here is where Bauer's argument becomes most historically significant, because he is not making a character judgment. He is making a documented commercial argument backed by numbers and named sources. Netflix reportedly between $80 and $100 million. Spare sold millions of copies worldwide. The Oprah interview generated coverage worth hundreds of millions in exposure value. The Daily Mail defamation case. The WHO visits. The New Statesman column. Colombia, Nigeria, Australia. Each presented to the public as something organic. An interview given from the heart. A documentary made for transparency, a book written for healing. Bauer's argument, built on documented research and named sources, is that every single one of those moments was a brick in the same commercial wall. Structure. A structure built on the raw material of institutional damage and monetized at scale. The contradiction he keeps returning to is simple and devastating. You cannot be suppressed and syndicated at the same time. You cannot claim the institution was silencing you while simultaneously selling access to the interior of that institution to the most valuable media partners available. The numbers do not allow for both narratives to be true simultaneously. One of them has to give. And Bauer's conclusion, after years inside the documented record, is that it was never about transparency or healing or accountability. It was about conversion. Converting institutional proximity into cultural capital as efficiently as possible before that proximity expired entirely. Here is where Bauer makes the claim that has received the least attention relative to its significance. Harry did not just exaggerate in interviews, according to Bauer. He gave false testimony, not misremembered, not misspoke under pressure. False testimony. In the Daily Mail defamation case, directly contradicted by Charlotte Griffiths, whose documented account of events told a materially different story from the version Harry put forward under oath. In any other context involving any other person, that is a career-defining moment. The kind of moment that defines how someone is treated by institutions and by the public for years afterward. When it involves Harry, it became a footnote. Bauer is insisting it is not a footnote. It is part of the same documented pattern of misrepresentation that runs through the Oprah interview, through the Netflix documentary, through Spare, and through every other piece of content generated from inside the record of this family. The scale of the misrepresentation varies. The pattern does not. Here is the line from Bauer that landed differently from everything else, and that deserves to be examined seriously rather than dismissed as provocative. He says Harry is too stupid to issue a sincere apology. Not too arrogant, not too calculated, too stupid. What he means, and the distinction matters, is that the self-awareness required to understand the scale of what was done and the intellectual architecture required to address it genuinely are both in Bauer's assessment simply absent. Harry does not appear to understand what he actually did, not the specific incidents, not the individual decisions. The cumulative institutional damage caused by years of documented misrepresentation sold to the most valuable media platforms available. And because he does not understand it, because the comprehension required to construct a genuine apology is not available, the apology will never come, not because he is choosing not to give it, because he cannot. Bauer was asked directly whether he could see Harry apologizing publicly to his family and to the United Kingdom. His answer was no. And his reasoning was not that Harry lacks the courage, it was that Harry lacks the understanding. That is a more damning verdict than simple arrogance would be. Arrogance can be overcome with sufficient pressure or motivation. Absence of comprehension cannot. Bauer's treatment of Meghan across his 2 books is equally specific and equally sourced, and he does not soften it for comfort. His position, documented across both revenge and betrayal, is that she entered the marriage with a clear objective: to use the royal platform to relaunch herself in Hollywood as quickly as the platform could be converted into cultural capital. Not to serve, but not to build, to convert and exit. When the institution did not cooperate, she did not adapt. She documented every grievance, every uncomfortable protocol, every perceived slight, became content, filed organized, and eventually sold to the most valuable media partners available. The hypocrisy record is long. She wore a $7,000 shirt to visit victims of violence in Colombia, $7,000 in one of the most economically fragile regions on the continent. She did not visit her own father when he suffered a stroke. She attended a Texas mass shooting memorial during that same period, an event with cameras, a platform and national coverage. The father, no cameras. The memorial, cameras everywhere. Bauer does not call that calculation malicious. He calls it tone-deaf. And given the documented pattern, tone-deaf is the most charitable available reading. She has simultaneously claimed she would never expose her children publicly while building a growing digital footprint for Archie and Lilibet across social media and an AI application, while Harry simultaneously insists on royal titles for those same children, titles that bind them to the institution he has spent 6 years describing as a psychological prison. He wants his children to have what he says nearly destroyed him. Either the cage was not what he described, or he is placing his children inside it deliberately. Bauer says there is no third reading available. Now let's talk about the security demand, because Bauer addresses it with the precision it requires and the precision it has rarely received in mainstream coverage. The claim is that Harry and Meghan need taxpayer-funded armed protection because of genuine documented threats. The reality Bauer describes is rather different. A 6-person private protection detail would cost a significant fortune. Publicly funded, it costs them nothing. But beyond the money, the motorcade is the last remaining visible symbol of institutional status that they can access without actually holding institutional position. The barricades go up at appearances. The streets are empty. Nobody is queuing for an arrival that has been staged to look like a state visit, but the motorcade moves through. And that motorcade tells the watching world, or is intended to, that these are people the British state considers important enough to protect with public resources. It is not primarily safety. It is staging. There has never been a demonstrated specific credible threat to Meghan or to the children. The only threats that have materialized publicly involve paparazzi. The same category of photographer Meghan uses professionally and extensively for her own purposes. Bauer's assessment is direct. The security argument is a financial calculation dressed as a safety concern and a Bauer status claim dressed as a practical necessity. Here is where Bauer makes the political logic of Charles's position absolutely plain, because it is Not coldness, and it is not grief. It is calculation from a king managing an extraordinarily precarious set of competing pressures. Charles is managing a monarchy under a Labour government with Republican-adjacent sentiment embedded in its policy thinking. The crown is not under existential threat, exactly, but it is being watched with newly critical eyes by a public that is now asking financial questions about the institution that previous generations simply did not ask. Into that environment, one visible accommodation to the couple who went on American television and described the institution in terms a Republican campaigner could have scripted themselves, and the questions being held at arm's length become impossible to contain. Charles is not being cold. He is being careful. Those are not the same thing. William is an entirely different matter. Bauer describes William's position not as grief and not as personal anger, but as institutional certainty. The settled, clear-eyed conviction of a man who understands what the crown requires and has drawn a line that a staged return event does not move. William is not waiting for Harry to come home. He is running an institution. One of those things is personal, the other is permanent. He has chosen the permanent one, and no amount of emotional packaging around an Invictus Games appearance, no amount of children and veterans and dying king imagery is going to move that line. Here is where everything lands. Tom Bauer is not working from instinct or opinion. He is working from documented research named Sources and a record that stretches across 2 books and years of sustained investigation. When he says the Invictus return is a strategic move wearing humanitarian clothing, that is not speculation. When he says the apology will never come because the self-awareness required to deliver it is genuinely absent, that is not cruelty. When he says the children are being deployed as tactical instruments rather than simply brought home to see family, that is not a hot take. That is the conclusion of the person who got closest to the full documented picture of what actually happened across 6 years, and came out the other side with that specific verdict. The plan is real. The emotional packaging around it, the children, the veterans, the dying king, the estranged brother, is real. The motorcade moving through empty streets is real. The celebrity silence from everyone who once called themselves close to Harry and Meghan is real. What is not real, according to every piece of evidence Tom Bauer has assembled from named sources across documented research, is the sincerity of what is driving it. The secret is out, and it turns out it was never really about coming home. This has been the Marquee Report. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next. See you on the next one.